All this must be done, of course, in a modest, friendly manner, without a hint of superiority. Others will answer, I could never do it. I am so worried. I tell them, don't stop worrying, but at the same time you can think now and then of others. I want to direct their interest always towards their fellows. Many say, why should I please others? Others do not try to please me. You must think of your health, I answer. The others will suffer later on. It is extremely rare that I have found a patient who said, I have thought over what you suggested. All my efforts are devoted towards increasing the social interest of the patient. I know that the real reason for his malady is his lack of co-operation, and I want him to see it too. As soon as he can connect himself with his fellow men on an equal and cooperative footing, he is cured. The most important task imposed by religion has always been love thy neighbor. It is the individual who is not interested in his fellow man who has the greatest difficulties in life and provides the greatest injury to others. It is from among such individuals that all human failures spring.
All that we demand of a human being, and the highest praise we can give him, is that he should be a good fellow worker, a friend to all other men, and a true partner in love and marriage. Dr. Adler urges us to do a good deed every day. And what is a good deed? A good deed, said the Prophet Muhammad, is one that brings a smile of joy to the face of another. Why will doing a good deed every day produce such astounding efforts on the doer? Because trying to please others will cause us to stop thinking of ourselves, the very thing that produces worry and fear and melancholia. Mrs. William T. Moon, who operates the Moon Secretarial School, 521 Fifth Avenue, New York, didn't have to spend 2 weeks thinking how she could please someone in order to banish her melancholy. She went Alfred Adler 1 better. No, she went Adler 13 better. She banished her melancholy not in 14 days, but in 1 day, by thinking how she could please a couple of orphans.
It happened like this. In December, 5 years ago, said Mrs. Moon, I was engulfed in a feeling of sorrow and self-pity. After several years of happy married life, I had lost my husband. As the Christmas holidays approached, my sadness deepened. I had never spent a Christmas alone in all my life, and I dreaded to see this Christmas come. Friends had invited me to spend Christmas with them. But I did not feel up to any gaiety. I knew I would be a wet blanket at any party. So, I refused their kind invitations. As Christmas Eve approached, I was more and more overwhelmed with self-pity. True, I should have been thankful for many things, as all of us have many things for which to be thankful. The day before Christmas, I left my office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and started walking aimlessly up Fifth Avenue, hoping that I might banish my self-pity and melancholy. The avenue was jammed with gay and happy crowd scenes that brought back memories of happy years that were gone.
I just couldn't bear the thought of going home to a lonely and empty apartment. I was bewildered. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't keep the tears back. After walking aimlessly for an hour or so, I found myself in front of a bus terminal. I remembered that my husband and I had often boarded an unknown bus for adventure, so I boarded the first bus I found at the station. After crossing the Hudson River and riding for some time, I heard the bus conductor say, "Last stop, lady." I got off. I didn't even know the name of the town. It was a quiet, peaceful little place. While waiting for the next bus home, I started walking up a residential street. As I passed a church, I heard the beautiful strains of Silent Night. I went in. The church was empty except for the organist. I sat down unnoticed in one of the pews. The lights from the gaily decorated Christmas tree made the decorations seem like myriads of stars dancing in the moonbeams. The long-drawn cadences of the music and the fact that I had forgotten to eat since morning made me drowsy. I was weary and heavy-laden, so I drifted off to sleep.
When I awoke, I didn't know where I was. I was terrified. I saw in front of me 2 small children who had apparently come in to see the Christmas tree. One, a little girl, was pointing at me and saying, "I wonder if Santa Claus brought her." These children were also frightened when I awoke. I told them that I wouldn't hurt them. They were poorly dressed. I asked them where their mother and daddy were. "We ain't got no mother and daddy," they said. Here were two little orphans much worse off than I had ever been. They made me feel ashamed of my sorrow and self-pity. I showed them the Christmas tree and then took them to a drugstore and we had some refreshments, and I bought them some candy and a few presents. My loneliness vanished as if by magic. These two orphans gave me the only real happiness and self-forgetfulness that I had had in months.
As I chatted with them, I realized how lucky I had been. I thanked God that all my Christmases as a child had been bright with parental love and tenderness. Those two little orphans did far more for me than I did for them. That experience showed me again the necessity of making other people happy in order to be happy ourselves. I found that happiness is contagious. By giving, we receive. By helping someone and giving out love, I had conquered worry and sorrow and self-pity, and felt like a new person. And I was a new person not only then, but in the years that followed. I could fill a book with stories of people who forgot themselves into health and happiness. For example, let's take the case of Margaret Taylor Yates, one of the most popular women in the United States Navy.
Mrs. Yates is a writer of novels, but none of her mystery stories is half so interesting as the true story of what happened to her that fateful morning when the Japanese struck our fleet at Pearl Harbor. Mrs. Yates had been an invalid for more than a year, a bad heart. She spent 22 out of every 24 hours in bed. The longest journey that she undertook was a walk into the garden to take a sunbath. Even then, she had to lean on the maid's arm as she walked. She herself told me that in those days she expected to be an invalid for the balance of her life. I would never have really lived again, she told me, if the Japs had not struck Pearl Harbor and jarred me out of my complacency.
When this happened, Mrs. Yates said, as she told her story, everything was chaos and confusion. One bomb struck so near my home, the concussion threw me out of bed. Army trucks rushed out to Hickam Field, Schofield Barracks, and Kaneohe Bay Air Station to bring Army and Navy wives and children to the public schools. There the Red Cross telephoned those who had extra rooms to take them in. The Red Cross workers knew that I had a telephone beside my bed, so they asked me to be a clearinghouse of information. So I kept track of where Army and Navy wives and children were being housed, and all Navy and Army men were instructed by the Red Cross to telephone me to find out where their families were.
I soon discovered that my husband, Commander Robert Raleigh Yates, was safe. I tried to cheer up the wives who did not know whether their husbands had been killed, and I tried to give consolation to the widows whose husbands had been killed, and they were many. 2,117 officers and enlisted men in the Navy and Marine Corps were killed and 960 were reported missing. At first I answered these phone calls while lying in bed. Then I answered them sitting up in bed. Finally, I got so busy, so excited, that I forgot all about my weakness and got out of bed and sat by a table. By helping others who were much worse off than I was, I forgot all about myself, and I have never gone back to bed again except for my regular 8 hours of sleep each night. I realize now that if the Japs had not struck at Pearl Harbor, I would probably have remained a semi-invalid all my life. I was comfortable in bed. I was constantly waited on, and I now realize that I was unconsciously losing my will to rehabilitate myself.
The attack on Pearl Harbor was one of the greatest tragedies in American history, but as far as I was concerned, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. That terrible crisis gave me strength that I never dreamed I possessed. It took my attention off myself and focused it on others. It gave me something big and vital and important to live for. I no longer had time to think about myself or care about myself. A third of the people who rushed to psychiatrists for help could probably cure themselves if they would only do as Margaret Yates did, get interested in helping others. My idea? No, that is approximately what Carl Jung said. And he ought to know if anybody does. He said, about 1/3 of my patients are suffering from no clinically definable neurosis, but from the senselessness and emptiness of their lives. To put it another way, they are trying to thumb a ride through life and the parade passes them by. So they rush to a psychiatrist with their petty, senseless, useless lives. Having missed the boat, they stand on the wharf, blaming everyone except themselves and demanding that the world cater to their self-centered desires.
You may be saying to yourself now, well, I am not impressed by these stories. I myself could get interested in a couple of orphans I met on Christmas Eve, and if I had been at Pearl Harbor, I would gladly have done what Margaret Taylor Yates did. But with me things are different. I live an ordinary humdrum life. I work at a dull job 8 hours a day. Nothing dramatic ever happens to me. How can I get interested in helping others? And why should I? What is there in it for me? A fair question. I'll try to answer it. However humdrum your existence may be, you surely meet some people every day of your life. What do you do about them? Do you merely stare through them, or do you try to find out what it is that makes them tick? How about the postman? For example, he walks hundreds of miles every year, delivering mail to your door, but have you ever taken the trouble to find out where he lives, or asked to see a snapshot of his wife and his kids? Did you ever ask him if his feet get tired, or if he ever gets bored?
What about the grocery boy, the newspaper vendor, the chap at the corner who polishes your shoes? These people are human, bursting with troubles, and dreams, and private ambitions. They are also bursting for the chance to share them with someone. But do you ever let them? Do you ever show an eager, honest interest in them or their lives? That's the sort of thing I mean. You don't.